And so we're looking at things like, maybe we can do NFT tickets, to the events. You go and buy your tickets directly through the app, show your phone, just like you do if you're boarding a plane, scan the barcode, you're in.
When you messaged me on LinkedIn, it was the funniest message I've received like the whole week. And you had said, "Hey, it's me I'm the CTO of Napster. Yes, we still exist." And I just started laughing. I screenshotted it. I texted it to my producer and my wife, and I was like, "This is hilarious." So do you get that a lot?
I get that a lot. We all get that a lot. It's either, if you're under 35, the question is, what's Napster? If you're over 35, it's, Napster. I remember Napster, and a lot of good memories. I mean, it's an iconic brand. But a lot of them, like, I didn't know you guys were still around. I didn't know you guys were still streaming. And we're really going to work hard to change that.
Yeah, as far as media goes, like entering the public media, Napster was one of the first tech brands to really do that in my lifetime.
That's right. I mean, it was the original disruptor. I mean, I've been around long enough to remember it. I was a user of it back in the day, and I really dug into the history of it to kind of understand it a bit. So, I mean, it started in 1999. It was, everybody knows the name Sean Fanning and Sean Parker, and they kind of created this thing to basically a peer-to-peer file sharing service. And primarily it was used originally for me, it was used for bootleg copies. You couldn't go and buy like concerts of like Pearl Jam that performed in Memphis in 97, which was a great concert. There's a lot of these things that, you just couldn't get at a CD store at Tower Records or whatever. So MP3s, which was a very new thing at the time, and some of them were taken from literally cassette tape recordings, and so they were not high quality, they were not great, but they were adequate for the time, and that eventually expanded to commercial, which it was exacerbated by the ability to rip and burn CDs, and so obviously that the history of that is pretty well known, I think, for Napster, if you do know Napster's history. And if not, it's we got into a lot of trouble around the RIAA and copyright infringement. And so, but it's important to note that Napster really ushered in that MP3 era to start to replace physical recordings as the media of choice for people to listen to music. And then, 2 years and 2 lawsuits after Napster was founded, or a couple lawsuits after it was founded, Napster 1.0 was essentially shut down. The company went bankrupt. And then, again, the important footnote there is that while they lost the legal battle, the actual war, the transformational war that occurred, was won, because consumers had to say, now, we don't want to just go buy an entire CD for 1 or 2 songs that we enjoy. We want to buy we want on a track selection. We want a little more a la carte. We want it instantly. We don't want to have to wait for this to appear. We want to be able to get it right away. And then in the aftermath of that, there was a company called Roxio that purchased the brand, and they were all the remaining assets. This was for like about $5 million or something ridiculously cheap in 2001. They later sold it, to Best Buy in 2008 for 120 million, I think is at the time. But at that time, Roxio had a product called Press Play, which is more like music purchasing. You could just go online and purchase those songs. So they tried to take the legit form of that. At the same time, while this is going on, there's a company called Rhapsody that's been built, and they're kind of running in parallel. And they had this engine called Aladdin that they actually, I think they purchased from listen2.com and tune2.com. And so they were the actual first streaming service around 2001. And this all converges right around 2011 when Rhapsody bought Napster. And then a few years later, like 2016, something like that, they basically phased out the Rhapsody name and became just Napster. Now, it's important to note that the parent company of Napster is Rhapsody International. You'll see some Rhapsody stuff here and there, but Napster is essentially the brand and the product. And now in 2020, a couple of years ago, Melody VR stepped in and they purchased Napster. That they were trying to interject some virtual reality, some video. They added video to the platform. They were trying to bring, virtual concerts, things like that to the mix. And then 2022, COVID took a hit, everybody took a hit on that. But 2022, Algorand and Hivemind, Algorand being a layer 1 Web3 blockchain, purchased Napster. And so now I was hired on as an Algorand employee. And one of my first tasks was, we need you to kind of come in and build this bridge to Web 2 and Web 3. We're trying to reinvigorate that renegade disruptor moniker of the iconic brand of Napster, and Web 3 was the way we wanted to do that. So I was put in, and then eventually moved my way into the CTO, the interim CTO position, and so that brings us to today. Sorry, the little long-winded history, but it's a long story. I mean, it's 20 years,
Yeah, it's moved around a lot, and it's in pop culture and everything.
Yeah.
Like last month, I was watching The Italian Job.
Okay.
And the large part of that is the guy that is like one of the thieves was the guy that created Napster, and it was stolen from him or something like that.
Yeah. It's also mentioned in The Social Network. Like, I have daughters, they're all they're all younger, and they hadn't heard of it. They said, "Oh, Dad's working for some company called Napster." They don't know what it is. And like, they watched The Social Network, which was really the story of Facebook, and I think Sean Parker's in that. Justin Timberlake plays him, and that scene became very popular on TikTok. And they're like, they mentioned it on TikTok. Oh my gosh, you're famous. I'm like, not really, but I had nothing to do with all that. I'm just kind of here now. So it's just kind of funny how that comes around in pop culture from time to time.
So when I found out we had a date booked to talk, I was like, oh, I got to do my research. So I went and signed up for a Napster account. Great. So thank you for making it easy to sign up quickly and all of that. And then my first thought was, this is a blue Spotify. The interface is blue, right? And I was like, this is Spotify, but it was like slightly different. And I didn't dig deep enough into it. So because I'm not a power user of Spotify, so I wouldn't be able to compare the granular features. So right. I figured I'd just ask, Brandon, what's the big differences between Spotify and Pandora?
That's a great question. Yeah. First thing it's important to know the missions are different. Spotify is, look, you can go and watch the, I think it's called The Playlist on Netflix, which talks about their history. It's very interesting. I watched it myself. But we're really about bringing the artists and fans together. And so that artist focus and the fan focus, is really what we're zeroing in on. This isn't to take anything away from, Spotify or YouTube Music or iTunes. But we're very invested in that particular piece. And, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube Music, they're not really my North Stars in terms of like what I look at from what's going to be the Napster of the future. I don't want to be strictly beholden to just playing piggyback. First of all, we don't have the resources to match those. Secondly, what the streaming platforms, all of them do, including us, is they create a very isolated experience. And so, I mean, in Spotify, you can go in and you can have a friend and you can see what they're listening to and possibly even listen along. But there's no real room for collaboration. Like, hey, I'll share a playlist with you, but let's make one together. Let's have a jukebox party at the house. We bring some fans and friends over. We can sit around and add music to it individually from our own phones and just create, a working group playlist, things like that. So we want to explore that more, not only from the user experience side, but also from the artist experience side. One of the things with the reports that you may have seen out there is that how much royalties are actually given back to the artists in the forms of their royalty payments. Napster's been, noted as higher. Now, I will caveat to say that that's based on a very limited test set or sample set of data. It's not always going to be the case because each contract is very different per the labels, per the artist. It's just not quite something you can zero in to say Napster pays their artists more than anybody else. But the, where we're looking at with the Web3 aspect, where we're bringing in, what Algorand is trying to do is to kind of introduce, open up multiple segments that fulfill a largely untapped market. And this is really three areas: the community building, which I talked about, because look, we can start to build organic communities around the genres that you're interested in, the subgenres, the artists themselves, the music festivals that you attend. We can start to gather this information and give a more curated experience around that. The second is going to be music distribution via NFTs, which I can talk about in a bit. And the third would be the royalty reporting, which is a big problem in the industry that every one of the DSPs and anybody who does music distribution shares. But from a user experience side, coming back to your question, it's just a blue Spotify. It's a fair point. We had to make this major relaunch, what we called N21, which was launched earlier this year. And a lot of that was a couple years of culminating updates to the user experience and the platform itself, the back end, the front end, all of that. We did almost a complete revamp of a lot.
It looks great.
Yeah.
It looks great, by the way. Yeah.
Thanks. And it's, but yeah, once we launched it, it's like we were still trying to play piggyback. So we can't keep looking at that. Look, we want the behavior to be familiar. We don't want it to be something like I've got to learn an entirely new thing of like, where do I get to my playlist? And they call it a library, and we're calling it my music. And, all of these differences just confuse people because they have a much larger audience than we do. And we don't want to make it difficult for them if they want to choose to use our platform. So hopefully that answers your question, at least in a bit of a roundabout way, because it's not that we looked at it and go, let's just do this, let's just do that. It kind of like user experience and behavior patterns all seem to kind of align. I want to get to my playlist as quickly as possible. I want to search and find music based on metadata that is common and easy to categorize and find information on, and then curate my own list of that and mark my favorites, and then just go back and listen to it at will.
Now, you keep mentioning the name of the parent company. Is that also a cryptocurrency? It
is. So Algorand it's a layer 1 blockchain. So their cryptocurrency is called the Algo. Now it's a pure proof of stake. It was actually founded by a Turing Award winner, which is basically the Nobel Prize in computers, Sylvia Macaulay, back in 2017. And is before the Ethereum merged and they moved to a pure proof of stake type of model. We were already doing that. And it's super fast. Transactions are super fast. Fees are super low, very scalable, highly secure, never been forked, never been hacked. And so, that's when I hired on. Those were the things I was looking for from a tech company to say, well, I don't just want to join any cryptocurrency company. I'd like to join one that's, that is actually going to be legitimate.
Yeah, I hold some of that.
Oh, you do? Okay. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, I hold cryptocurrency not as investment. Really, I don't think about it as it doesn't come up in my investment portfolio conversations. The way I look at it is I own things based off of the utility of the coin.
Super smart.
Right? So Filecoin, love Filecoin.
Yep.
The interplanetary file system just sounds cool.
Yep.
Obviously, that's the direction we're headed.
Mm-hmm.
Will it be worth something? I don't really know. I don't care, but I want to own some of it. I want to own some of it because it is the future, and it's like owning the future. And I only do it with the amount of money I'm willing to completely lose. But it's fun to get to understand, because my parents were asking me, because my dad was technical. He was an engineer and things like that, but He didn't really follow the crypto stuff. And my stepmom's a physician. And so she was like, hey, you talk about this cryptocurrency stuff a lot, and how do you invest, and should we put some money in there? And I was like, no, probably not. You should.
When was this recently?
No, this was before the latest crash.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And so I was like, probably not, because I said the only reason why you should do some is you should buy some to understand the process and the concept of holding the money. And you should understand, buy it if you want to understand the differences between holding on an exchange and holding in an offline wallet, and understanding these concepts of it's basically like a preview to currency of the future. Right. So for that aspect, I was like, okay, I'll hide. So I got some. I keep some on my exchange. I keep some in I think it's like a Trezor or something like that, some type of physical wallet.
Cold store wallet, yeah.
Yeah. And so just to kind of understand, what the kids these days, what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, it's in terms of it's still so relatively new. I mean, Bitcoin's been around for quite a number of years now, going almost getting close to a decade, I think. And but even the adoption of that in terms of business usage of it, which is really what Algorand focuses on. It's not just hey, go buy our token and let's all make billions of dollars together. This is not a FOMO catch up to the Bitcoin, I should have bought it when it was $1 type of thing. This is utilizing the tech to actually solve problems, and not trying to find problems or use the tech as a hammer to where everything becomes a nail. But it's really, where can we apply practical usage of a blockchain technology, which is really just a distributed database in the cloud. IPFS just takes that to an nth degree in terms of now storing files rather than just little blocks of small data. And so, I think, in terms of like a crawl, walk, run, we're at the drool phase, especially when we're talking about NFTs, which are really, really early, and a lot of misunderstandings about like what NFTs are and what they're actually used for, supposed to be used for. People confuse them like, well, they're just JPEGs. Like, why do I care about owning a JPEG? I don't want to pay $1,000 for a JPEG to sit in a wallet on my phone that I could just download and have it for free. There's a lot of, I think, misunderstanding around that. And it's just, you have the Web3 technical people who are actually talking about it. And you have the marketing and, business to speak people who are trying to synthesize that. And the translation gets wildly lost along the way.
Yeah. From what I understand, it's like, I don't want like a picture of a title. I want what comes with the title.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And so I don't really understand it deeply. So is that what it is? Like, this is the graphical representation of the ownership?
The NFT is the actual, you want to think of it like a certificate of authenticity, meaning you own this image. I can't speak to the utility of that. People will infer value based on it. But from a long-standing or from a forward-looking standpoint, that's not where it's going to stop. I mean, we're looking at using music NFTs. This is a very emerging market right now. Like, how do we take the JPEGs out of the equation and let's put a music file behind that? And what can we do with that? How can we use that now as a part of a streaming platform to say, okay, we will mint the NFTs for this song, and anyone who has ownership of this song can now stream it. And every time you stream it, part of a smart contract reads that and then writes that out to the chain as you streamed this song for 5 seconds on this date at this time. And then that becomes part of the royalties payout, which right now is super problematic. But I'm sorry, coming back to the actual blockchain, like holding versus trading versus, the commodities of it. I think what people need to understand is like blockchains only make money when blockchain's being used. And so you're right to invest in things with utility. It's the smartest way to do it. You want to look at the long-standing efficacy of, is this who's using it? Why are they using it? What are they using it for? And then what does that entail in terms of like a future prospect? And that's how you should make your decisions based off that. I don't really personally focus on that commodity side of it, the commercial side of it, like trading, buying, selling, holding. It's more about utilizing the tech in a way that's going to solve actual problems, because it is a very advanced, we're going from a very centralized type of architecture to a decentralized, which is different than a distributed architecture. And as we move to decentralized, and this now puts ownership back into people's hands, privacy is a huge issue right now. Any social media out there, you're going to be concerned about like, well, what data am I putting out there and how do I get it back? How do I take it with me? Web3, which is the third evolution of the web, from a read only, you were just reading web pages, to read write. You're now able to update and edit things and interact with data, to read, write, and own, which is Web3. You can now take your identity with you wherever you go. I would like for you to be able to log into Napster, your identity is there. And if you decide to leave Napster and go to another place, you can take it with you. We don't keep it. We don't own that. You can take it with you. All your preferences, your playlists, what you like, what you don't like, all of that goes with you to the next streaming service, and so on and so forth. And coming back around to the music NFTs, that is something that we can, we've looked at using IPFS, like, can we put the music out there? The legalities are just too difficult, because now we're back to being a piracy company, and obviously we don't want to go back to that. That didn't end well the first time. We're not going to go back to that route.
Nostalgia play.
Yeah, that's a real throwback, and dangerous territories. But it's worth looking at the tech, and that's my point.
Yeah, have you guys considered, or are you in the process of building infrastructure to solve this royalties problem?
We have. So it's important to note the background of what this how royalties work now. And look, I'm not an industry insider. I haven't been in the music industry for, number of years, but I was able to glean a lot of this. And essentially how it works is, if you're the artist and I'm the streaming provider, you give me your music, and then I tell you how many people streamed your music and when and how. I give you a report on that. And then I tell you how much I owe you. So it is not even a real, it's a very trust-centric model. Like, you have to really trust the data that I'm giving you is accurate, and then the money that sits on top of it accurately reflects the data. That's also very slow and sluggish. It takes a number of months to crunch the data, process the numbers, run the stuff out, get this to you. Then there's a back and forth like, well, hang on a minute. Is this right? Is this wrong? It's a negotiation. And then there's the actual payment, which also takes a little bit of time to get those out. This is a huge problem that everybody faces. iTunes, Spotify, it's an industry problem. And by utilizing the chain now, what we can do is we can write that out. It's a distributed database. It's near real time. So you can see that information that's out there. It's still private and secure. We would never put individual users out there. It's just a user with this abstract ID streamed this song for this long on this date. And that's now readable from, the other side, from the labels or the artists themselves. So you don't have to trust us because the blockchain doesn't lie. We can't artificially change things. It has to be by consensus. So as we're writing out there, it's being confirmed by multiple systems. They can see all of this and they're like, I trust that this data is accurate now. Also, on the tail end of that is the payments, because there is a token assumedly behind that. And this is very long-term future. It could be to where we're instantly paying as a result of that. It doesn't need to be this one lump sum check that we're sending out, to make payments to it. So it would be fractions of a cent for each stream, but that will accumulate over time. And then you would have basically the data would be accurate and trustable. And then the financial aspect of it would be dealt with as well.
That's pretty interesting. And so do you think that there's an incentive for Spotify's and Pandora's to move to this? Is there an incentive on the publisher's end?
Yeah, we're not the only ones who have tried to tackle this. I mean, this is, I don't know what they're doing specifically on there, but what I'd like to move us to is to be the platform for that. Like Spotify can link to our NFTs and play the music from our content streaming platform through them. Still take their amount of money. We get a small cut of that, and it's again recordable on chain. That's a long-term vision, and definitely not on any roadmaps anywhere that I would publish. But these are kind of like visionary type things that I'm looking at. Like, how do I solve this for the industry, not just for us? And it helps Napster, helps the industry, helps artists.
I was just talking, I think, a week or two ago with the guy who's credited as like the father of SSL.
Okay.
And he was over at, obviously it was a team and it was a lot of people and it was a whole thing, but he had assumed a leadership position after having some success in technology at Netscape. And they were trying to solve this problem, the industry problem of this data and the commerce advancing. And so SSL was a proposed solution. And then he took it from idea to completion. And he realized, I think he said like 3/4 of the way through, he realized that the only way that this thing was actually going to happen was if they went and they made it a standard, and that they like no one specifically owned it. And there was some tech organization, I forget the name of it,
right,
but that manages these standards and such. And he's like, that would be the only way we could make it work. So they got together with Microsoft and some of the other big companies, and they're like, would you adopt this standard if we make it an open thing? And then everyone said, yep. And then that's SSL. And so that might be a valid way to do it.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of these emerging techs become mainstay because of that, because it becomes, either some type of ISO standard, or it becomes, just an adopted standard. It's like, well, this works. We're now experimenting, APIs are done through OAuth, almost invariably. We've got gRPC and, we've got, all these other ones, but those become, technical standards in and of themselves because it's ubiquitous wherever you go. OAuth is OAuth. Whether you choose to use it or not is a different story. But when you do, you know how it works. You understand the underlying mechanics of it. And I think this follows the same route. SSL, TLS, all of that came about as a result of we have a serious problem that is absolutely omnipresent in terms of how do we secure web pages, that are we're interacting with them now, and how do we make sure that data transmits from receiver to sender unhindered. Same with how music is being done. How do we transfer that music, stream that music to somebody else, and we know that that's being recorded correctly? Because we have a lot of fraud that's out there too. We have a lot of these bots that come in and create artificial plays and strum up a lot of playlists, and we're paying for things that actually people aren't really using. They're just bots. And so, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I would love to see, there's a lot of standards I wish were in place in multiple markets, because I come from legal tech and I come from Ben tech, and the standards are, they're they're frayed everywhere.
Yeah, I had a podcast pop up on my like you might want to listen to or new tech podcast. And I was like, oh, cool. Someone's doing another technology podcast. Like, I love these things. And so I go to subscribe to it. And they were like, 2 episodes deep and they had like 975 star reviews. I was like,
yeah.
I was like, I've been operating this for 600 episodes. I know what the natural review if you don't like bother people for. And then I know what you can get if you do bother people for it. And I was like, they just bought the reviews.
Yeah, it's a real problem that we have to face. I don't know how the others are dealing with it. I mean, we talk to a lot of the same providers for fraud prevention, and they say, "Oh, we've done this for Rhapsody or for Pandora. We've done this for and we look at how it's going to be done. Can we do it on the edge? Can we do it after the fact as a part of a reporting aspect? My preference is I want it done real time as everywhere as possible." But yeah, it's kind of wacky, and you can't really like attribute it to like, well, who's doing it? Like the labels wouldn't do this. The artist really, that goes through the labels. So how is this being done? Like where we can't really attribute causality to it. Just we know that it's happening.
Yeah.
So it's strange, but I think that is a definitely gamification of the system for sure.
So what was the actual moment that you got this offer to work with Napster? I mean, that must have been pretty cool.
Yeah, it was right away, actually. So I was, when I was hired on an Algorand, it was kind of we're going to figure it out as we go. Like they knew they wanted me to come on board. They had a lot going on at the time. There was a massive list of projects available to work on. We were looking at creating, coins for tourism within specific countries, so that you come in on a cruise ship and you could use a cryptocurrency to buy things at the, different ports of call and stores and whatnot without having to do fiat transfers and go buy the local currency, things like that. We were looking at things like that. We were looking at using the blockchain to provide what's called a proof of truth. So there was a consensus-based truth model because, we were in a political climate at the time that, fake news, false news, artificially inflated, sensationalized headlines were, creating a lot of different things in the media industry. And they wanted to, well, can we shape this to give us just facts and give us more information using blockchain technology and a consensus method? And then there was Napster. So when I got hired on, I really didn't know what I was going to do day one. Had no idea. I knew I was going to be helping people build bridges to Web3. And then one of the names that came up was Napster. I was like, well, that's a blast from the past. Tell me more about this. What do we need to do here? And they said, well, we just acquired them. And we're really, their name is just well known as the original disruptor in the industry. Web3 is a potentially disruptive technology. Let's see if we can make this happen. So I was like, yeah, let's do it.
Are you still exploring, or do you know the disruptive thing that you're going to be doing?
So I tell you what, we went through 4 months of ideation, just kicking over the possibilities, the art of the possible, what we could do. We had a lot of industry people that had been in this for years. We've got people that work at Napster that have been here since the Roxio days 20 years ago. They're still, they know where the bodies are buried, and they know the mistakes that have been made in the past. So learning from them has been, super helpful. And we have people that are serious Web3 media type folks too. It's like, what about this? How do we deal with that? How do we, what can we offer in terms of like collectibles? Like, can we make album art something that's collectible for people, and people can maintain collections? Because people like to have that type of interactivity and that involvement. And when you talk about fans, they're short for fanatics for a reason. They really are invested in the artist. And when we talked about NFTs, music NFTs are, you'd have a hard time naming 5, digital artists that do NFTs, but you could probably name 5 musical artists who could do NFTs. And some of them do. Snoop Dogg's doing NFTs, T-Pain's doing NFTs. I mean, nothing new under the sun right now, but they're all just very experimental. So we're like, well, how can we shape this into something that's going to be a realistic thing? And we want to make it as seamless as possible for users, because look, no one's going to come in here and understanding crypto. No one's going to come in here understanding blockchain, this, Web3, that. Like, what does it look like for me as just a general? I just want to listen to music, man. I don't need to be bothered with all this other stuff. I want to get in and play my music. And so we're looking at things like, maybe we can do NFT tickets, to the events. You go and buy your tickets directly through the app, show your phone, just like you do if you're boarding a plane, scan the barcode, you're in. So we're trying to reach out beyond just digital streaming, music streaming, but kind of like create experiences for fans. We've got some explorations we're doing into the metaverse too. Is this something we want to be a part of? Is this something that we can maybe bring some disruption to as well? Is this a disruptive technology at all? So I think we've zoned in on. We started out with just all these just whiteboarded brainstorming type of ideas, and we've shaped them down to we try to be analytical about what has the most impact for the artist and what has the most impact for the user and what has the most impact for us and what has what's the level of effort that's going to be needed in this, et cetera, et cetera. And now I think we've got that down to a pretty good comprehensive list, at least for our next year. I don't like looking beyond like 3 to 6 months because things are going to change, and it's just planning that out for that far. Just you're just going to go back to the drawing board anyway. So I don't know if I'm answering your question on that. I mean, that's
yeah. Well, you're saying words and they sound good, and that's the purpose of the
show. It's legible, good.
Now, for me, one of the things I've constantly reminding myself of is that when I think something is interesting, or I like something, or I don't like something, that's really only good for people who are like really similar to me. So I try not to come up with too many thoughts about things. For example, you mentioned like Twitch or video streaming, game watching earlier. When I saw Twitch come out, I wouldn't have invested any money into them. Yeah. I completely dismissed it. I was like, I grew up playing video games. Like, if the whole point is like yelling at the person and pushing them until you get the controller and it's your turn again.
Yep.
I was polite, but that definitely happens as a kids. And the idea that I would spend my free time to sit down and watch someone else play a game was like so far beyond my realm of understanding. I was like, no. And then I look at it and they have like billions of hours of views or users, and the esports industry is like massive. Now, okay, I get a competition, but these people are like casually going about their day, playing these games, talking about different things, and they just have tens of thousands of people watching them do this. And I was like, man, that is super interesting. I think I would be interested in something like that if it was like, I like music a lot. If it was like, Taylor Swift sitting down to write a song, I'd be like, oh, this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like I watched her Netflix special or whatever. And I was like, you have to respect her. She just owned the top, I can't name 10 of her songs, by the way, but she owned the top 10 Billboard. Did you hear about that?
Yeah. Yep.
Dude, that's insane.
Yeah, and it changes. It changes so quickly, and you're right. And a lot of them are, a lot of the artists are that really when you ask them what they want, obviously Taylor Swift doesn't need any more money. She doesn't need any more fame. That's probably not her guiding thing. That a lot of them are about fan interactions, about how they deal with fans. Like something that Taylor Swift does is she has a close circle of friends that she brings over, and I think they do baking parties at her house or something like that.
Nice.
I'm not the biggest Taylor Swift fan in the world, so don't quote me on that. I know that is a driver for them, is to have that kind of that bridge between the fan and the art, their own fans, because that's how they grow. Really what they want is distribution. They want their music to be heard. And to do that, you build these organic communities, and the organic communities will extend their reach. And to your point about Twitch, same thing. You look at them like they're not the best gamers in the world. These are not like pro gamers and things like that. But what they have is a community that is built around them. So you watch their chat, if you can keep up with that crazy scrolling that some of them have going on. But they have a community around them. A lot of them jump on the Discord in between the streams that happen, and that they're all kind of centered around this subject matter that they all care deeply about, and that's the organic communities. And I think with music, you can definitely recreate that magic, and that's, as I alluded to earlier, that's one of the things that's missing.
Are you guys doing like original content or just communities?
You mean like what's being produced?
Like, do you guys do your own shows? Like, Spotify bought Joe Rogan, but Spotify also makes some of its own show. They didn't buy it. They did whatever their deal was with them.
We don't. Now it's strictly music. We've dabbled with the idea of podcasts. Do we want to offer podcasts? We would rather, I think the general consensus is we would rather integrate with something that already has that. That way, when you're maintaining your list of favorites and things like that, you're not having to go to 4 different platforms to listen to your, like I have my favorite on Spotify, because that's where I go to listen to my podcast. If I had to go somewhere else and then like, okay, how do I get this over there? And how do I get that? Am I going to get notified by 3 different apps that the same guy, Joel just published a new video or a podcast? We want to try to make it, again, it's got to be about the user experience. Like, what are we adding? Are we just trying to keep up with the Joneses? Are we just leapfrogging functionality? That's really not a business model for us.
You're a Marine.
I am. Yes.
Yeah. Tell me about that. What did you do?
I was a musician, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I was born and raised in a small town, Evansville, Indiana. And middle school, high school, I had a friend whose mom was a CIO at the time, and they had a home computer, and that was a super rare thing. Small town Indiana having a home computer. This is like the 80s, and they became fascinated by it. Not only like what it did, but what it could do. I just fell in love immediately. It was just mind blowing at the time. I asked my parents for a computer while everybody else wanted TVs or Air Jordans or Walkmans. I'm asking for a computer. They kind of raised an eyebrow, and they thought, I guess it might keep him out of trouble for at least a little while. He'll probably lose interest and throw it in the trash. So they got me. I remember waking up vividly to still see the image in my head today, seeing a computer desk, an old oak, 80s computer desk with an Atari 800 XL hooked up to an old black and white television set with a cassette tape, hard drive, floppy drive. Well, I don't know if you'd call it a hard drive or floppy drive. It's a disk drive. And a big ribbon over the top of it, So I played with that all the time. I mean, I was just tinkering, and I'd get magazines, I'd go to user group meetings, and all this stuff. And I was really like interested in it. And this is middle school, high school, and then after high school, I joined the Marines, and that's where I was stationed in Hawaii, which as you can imagine, was pretty rough. To be put in Hawaii. It's like, all right, I guess. But I was as a musician, and while I was there, I bought a Packard Bell. In the military, we had these things on base called PXs, post exchanges. You said you're a military brat, right? So you know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like the Walmart on base or whatever. And you got the store credit. One of my roommates got a TV set. One of them got a stereo. I got a computer, old 486, this Packard Bell. And I started to tinker with BBSs, configured my own WinSock to get on the internet, which was very new at the time. There was really nothing there on the internet. I remember using MIRC for the first time. Chatting with somebody in real time around the world was just, again, another mind-blowing experience. It's been one of those kind of eureka moments after another. And so, yeah, I went in as a musician. And when I got out, really the only thing I was qualified to be was a security guard. So that's what I did. I was a security guard at a casino, and they happened to be rolling out a new piece of software called Windows 95. I'm like, hey, I know Windows. I'm like, oh, cool. You want to come in and we'll do a little bit of work for us? I did. And they eventually offered me a networking operator job where they were replacing these old AS400 mainframes with Windows 95. A big jump for the time. I sat in the bottom of this casino boat with a microwave link back to land, to the internet, and this was, late 90s, teaching myself HTML and Perl. Because there was nothing, all I did was fix printers, most of the time. So it was the graveyard shift. So I was there from like 11 p.m. until like 7 or 8 in the morning. And so I had nothing really better to do. So I sat there and learned HTML and Perl, taught myself how to do web design, graphic design, et cetera, became a webmaster, eventually went to work for Caterpillar, which is, Fortune 50 company. I was the webmaster, which you're everything. You're the graphics guy, the networking guy, you're the programmer, you do it all. And then things started to become more specialized. This was around Y2K. And I'm like, I don't really want to pick one of my favorite children, of the tools that I built in my belt. So I went into more project management. That took me into legal tech. I went to work for a law firm. Then I went to work for a legal tech startup out in Silicon Valley called Intap, and then Bentech, and then Napster, or Algorand Napster.
Nice. And then what would you credit your advancements between your roles? Was it relationships? Was it recruiters? How did you get a leg up?
I think it's the constant curiosity and the autodidactic nature of, I've never set foot in a computer class. I don't have a computer science degree, but I went from developer to CTO, I think, just off of just being naturally curious about things and wanting to understand. It's an engineering mindset. I don't think you become an engineer. I think you just naturally are an engineer, and it's what you do with it is really what matters. And So I had that engineering mindset. I like to understand how things work. Can I break this and put it back together again? I do this stuff with, just outside of technology too. And a lot of people are like that. And I think that credit is constantly keeping up with it. But that's what drew me to it in the first place, because it changes so much. This is not a static, you're not a factory line worker stamping the same piece of metal as it walks across the, the conveyor belt. You're always having to learn what's coming out. When cloud came about, I was all about that. I was just invested in this. This is amazing. Nobody really knew what it was. It's kind of like Web3 now. It was just kind of this ubiquitous term. What is cloud? Where is the cloud? How does the cloud work? But that's the part of being a technologist, is that you have to keep up with it in order to be good at it. But you should have a natural curiosity and love of that in order to, and it just it perpetuates.
When people that are, within your org, when they want more opportunity, what type of, that was obviously great advice, but think back to something else. I want something else. I want more. I want more, Brandon. What else would you tell them if I want you to think of a person right now who's within your org, you don't have to name them, and they're doing well and they're showing signs, and you're thinking, hey, maybe I should invest a little bit of my time into them and opportunity. What are those things that they're doing that are standing out to you?
So it would be initiative. I think the initiative is going to be the first part. You've got, some people are very much heads down, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And I don't want to devalue that type of work at all, because they're usually very good at that too. And that's how they like to operate. But if we're talking about advancement, primarily to a leadership role or managerial role or something like that. Now, I don't believe in just because you do a good job, you're therefore qualified as a manager. It's two totally different skill sets in most cases. But for that person that you just described in that scenario, I would say the initiative has to be there from I am going to take this on. Now, the initiative has a lot of different aspects to it. One of them is a nonconformist mindset. I'm not just going to follow the status quo. I'm not just going to follow the direction set. I'm going to challenge the conventional thought that's out there. I personally love Socratic method, people who think like that are very questioning of things, and they ask questions in a way that kind of lead them to a truth. And that to me shows initiative too. When you are honestly seeking truth in terms of solutioning or designing or architecture, these are the things I look for from people that are moving on that. And that's an initiative based aspect for me, not just getting the job done autonomously.
Yes. Yeah. Truth. That is one of the things that, we track here, I guess. When I was first starting this, I was trying to figure out, what's the recipe for a great leader?
Yeah.
So we did all these interviews and we asked them all these questions, all these leadership related things, and we started tracking them in a spreadsheet. And I was trying to figure out what's that one formula? And after 600 episodes, I've come up with the following, one or two things. Number one is everybody has something that anchors them, some sort of system or something that they find very important that they do religiously and consistently. So that's one thing that I've seen. And then curiosity, that's the other thing. And then to become better, so people would ask me all the time, how do I become a better tech leader? And I used to answer check out this book or check out this whatever resource material. And then I realized after so I'm interviewing these people, I'm building my business, I'm implementing their advice in my business. And then sometimes it goes great, sometimes it doesn't. And what I end up finding out is that it's really, really difficult to constantly improve yourself, but that's the answer. So when people ask me now, how do I become a better leader? I'm well, how many days do you work out? What's your diet look like? Because if you're constantly improving yourself and improving those areas of discipline, then that makes you a better leader, because leaders are typically people, they're people that you want to follow. That's why it's so interesting when people get up early. You notice how much respect someone gets if they wake up at 4:30 in the morning. But if you're in a different time zone, it's not the act of it being 4:30 in the morning. It's the act of it's something difficult that you don't want to do, and they can do it. And so having that realization, I was okay, cool. So all I have to do is do really difficult things for the rest of my life.
There you go.
And things will go well. Yeah.
I love the parallels to that. And the one question I ask of everybody I interview for a leadership position, whether you're managing 2 people or 250 people, what is your definition of leadership? That's what I ask them. And I look for the one thing that I've taken away as my definition of leadership. And mine actually comes from my time in the Marine Corps. I served under this 3-star general at the time. His name was Charles Krulak, and he later became commandant of the Marine Corps. And he was a decorated Vietnam veteran, platoon commander, Purple Heart, Silver Star, you name it. His father was General Krulak, commandant of the Marine Corps during World War II. So we're talking about an organization that deals in life and death on every day. And then, so leadership from this type of individual is going to be well received. He came to one event we were at, was just kind of, we were all very low rate, E1s, E2s, E3s. And it's like, let me ask you something. What's your definition of leadership? He walked around and asked her, and we were like, it's, setting the example, and it's, the constant improvement, those things. He nodded, and he's like, look, all of the answers you gave, none of them are wrong. I'm not looking for a right answer here, because let me tell you mine just to help you out. He goes, it is just this simple. Serve those in your charge. So what we now know of is servant leadership. And that has stuck with me to this day. And I evolve that all the time. So when I ask someone coming in for a managerial role, what's your definition of leadership? They're not going to give me a wrong answer. They're going to give me a true, honest answer. But what I look for in leaders are people who actually serve those. You've got to be there for them. You need to be reliable. People don't follow people because of titles. They follow people because they believe in what they're actually after. This is a Simon Sinek type of,
I love that guy.
Yeah, same. So that type of philosophy, like I could incorporate it. He did a study on the military too, which was super interesting. But that I think there's got to be that inherent trust there, that I trust this person to look after my best interest. And therefore I'm going to make sure that I earn that trust every day. And I've got to earn their trust every day. That's just important to me. And trust goes laterally too. You can't have a good C-suite without that trust. I have to rely on the CMO, the CFO, COO, all of them. There's a trust that's inherent across the board and top to bottom as well. You've got the technical teams, the trust between the users, the trust between the C-suite, like I mentioned, board members, investors. And CTOs, I think, need to be highly attuned to that audience so that they can, talk about what they're doing and build that trust in a way that's not ivory tower or siloed or, So anyway, I went on a little bit of a long tirade there, but I think to me, that's imperative to a well-functioning, not only leadership body, but a leadership individual.
It's like the opposite of FTX.
Right. Yeah. Whew. Yeah.
Oh man.
So right.
I had never heard that guy talk. Like I just had never really known him or anything like that. And then, the whole issue with him happened and somebody posted some clip of him, ragging on the banking industry at some Senate hearing or whatever years ago. And, I listened to I clicked play. I was like, I want to see what this guy sounds like, see how he talks. Cause I'm into that, right? I like to know how people talk. And he said like more than a high school girl. Like it was a 15-second clip. He said like 18 times.
New drinking game was invented. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought to myself, this guy was worth $30 billion and he didn't spend a couple $1,000 on a coach to teach him how to speak.
Right. Yeah.
So, but that's my experience with FTX. I didn't have any money there. And when I saw it happen, I was like, if I would have heard that individual speak, I would never have, if I was thinking about putting money there or if I was thinking about investing in it and then I heard him speak, I'd be like, no, I like people who speak. Well, I know I'm biased. It's not a great system or whatnot. And it is what it is, but that's one of my prereqs.
Yeah. That's how you make your assessments. It shows intelligence, it shows IQ, EQ, everything based on some of communication is inherently part of that trust, piece I was talking about. So I would be right there with you. Yeah. Luckily it didn't impact me directly, but I think it impacted everyone indirectly. And, stepping back to the crypto world, the Web3 world is, that's kind of like the opposite of what the intention was. It was meant to be a decentralized thing to where not one place or person or thing could bring the whole system down. And when you have things like that, you have to start looking at centralized exchanges as they're easy, but they're not really based on the principles of what it was supposed to be. You're supposed to be your own bank. And when you go through, a central exchange, you're kind of defeating the purpose again. FTX being a prime example. That Mount Gox, like something like 7-8 years ago, same thing.
Which is fascinating because it's for outside people. I mean, it's like a crypto 101 thing, but for the average person who's buying it from investment, they don't really get that. They're like, it goes up, I want to buy it, and I use Coinbase to buy it.
That's right. That's right.
Right. For your leadership question,
Yeah.
if I were to answer you, if you said, okay, what is leadership? And I were to answer you influence, what would you think of that?
I would want you to expand on that, because influence could mean you could influence in very negative ways, or in negative methods. Not just the output, but like I would say, define that a little further. Say more.
Yeah. Well, I was reading some leadership author a while back, and he had written hundreds of leadership books, and he had said leadership is influence, and I was like, well, that's interesting, because let's rip that apart.
Right.
And the way he had explained it was, in order, leaders have followers. Right? To be a leader, you have to have a follower. And to have a follower, you have to have influenced somebody, right? Whether it's just your presence influencing them. So it's not the negative influence way, connection to the word, but in a positive way. You have to have impacted them or influenced them in some way, shape, or form in order for them to know that you exist, in order for them to even follow you. And then it's okay, so you can be how do you do that better, right? And you be really useful to people. Right. You figure out, okay, here's these people. How can I be incredibly useful for them?
That's servant leadership to me. That's certainly, So I would say based on that definition, you would meet with what I was looking for. I mean, I think with influence, some of that can be, I don't want to say artificial, but indirect. Again, it goes back to the title thing. But you're a manager. You have manager after your name. Therefore, you have an air of authority around you because of that title. That's what you're paid for. So therefore, I have to follow you because it's part of the org chart. I'm now your follower. So that's an indirect thing. But are you a leader at that point? I mean, if you can influence me directly, totally with you on that. Yeah.
So, all right. Leadership, influence. What other leadership advice do you have that's really great?
I mean, there's some things, again, just because we've talked about, the Marine Corps, that influence that it's had on me. And look, I didn't serve very long in there, but it's a life-changing event. And you hate it when you're in, but you miss it ever since, after you leave. I still take away a couple things, both from that and then just things that I picked up along the way. And one thing is I also assume is what's called a rule of three. And it's, you'll hear me, when you hear me talk, I talk in patterns of three. These are the three things that we're looking at. When I talk about the Web3 area being primarily driven by these three areas, it's simpler for people to process. It's easier for me to remember. And it's more manageable. So 3 direct reports, if at all possible. That hardly ever works out because organizations are organizations. But 2 things that can work and have worked for me has been setting 3 objectives, for either the quarter, the year, whatever the case may be, with proper OKRs. They got to be measurable, actionable. They can't just be make things better, do things faster. It's got to be something actual tangible that you can look back on. But also focusing on 3 things at any given point. I am always thinking about 3 things that I'm going to do for the day. And those can change. You're not locked into those because priorities will change. But that way I've maintained that. That comes from the Marine Corps. They did this rule of 3. They actually tried 4, things started failing. So okay, that's it. 3 is all you get. And I think, again, with an organization based on a life and death scenario, that's something that I can take as influence. Something else that I've taken away just organically as a tech leader is I look for my own leadership and my own peers to respect the tech. And that does not mean it needs to be revered, right? So I don't want to confuse respecting technology with revering it or holding it to some higher. It's not on some pedestal. But I have a common mistake that I see is to diminish the importance of technology in any vertical, but especially in tech companies. Because I think Mark Andreessen said it best. We're all basically tech companies at this point now. Everything's based on that. So I think, when it comes to people who are outside of it or even inside of it, respecting the technology, just knowing that it's an important, vital piece. It's not just some simple thing or it's not some overly complicated thing. Just treat it for what it is. It's just essential to the operational efficiency of any organization, whether you are a tech company or not. So I think that'd be the only other things I'd say.
What are your 3 objectives for this quarter, if you can share them publicly?
For this quarter, it is getting our, they're part of my major OKR. So I have operational stability and I've got metrics around what that actually means. So the amount of downtime that we're allowed to have, the amount of SLAs that we're allowed, and then revenue growth is my second one. So that is how the tech can support the business objectives in a revenue growth pattern. So retaining the partnerships that we have, offering new services and new products and new features that are out there that is, has a measurable revenue side to it, because we've got to grow Napster and get out of this "I can't believe you're still around" question. And then the third is having that Web3 strategy in place. So that is, what is it that we're looking ahead and beyond just like maintaining the ship, putting us on a growth pattern based on existing our existing strategy, but also like what our new piece is. So we are working through with the Web3 tech strategy, putting together a white paper for all that, exploring a token launch, those kind of things.
For the revenue growth,
yeah,
is that something? Is there like a CEO too, or are you sort of running the whole thing?
No, I'm not. No, we have a CEO. He just came on a couple months ago. It comes from Roblox, so he brings a lot of yeah.
I saw that this weekend I interviewed the guy forever ago, but then my kids got old enough to play, and this weekend we had some of our friends stop by, and they have five kids. And all under the age of 10, and they each had their own iPad essentially, and they were showing us Roblox. And so today, my wife downloaded that for my daughter. So we're new to it, but we know of it. So he came over from Roblox. What's his name?
John Vlasopoulos. He was the head of music at Roblox.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
And so he's determined, he's got revenue growth goals.
Absolutely.
And then your goals are aligned to help support him achieve.
I firmly believe that the tech's function my org's function is to support the business objectives with the technology.
Are you acting in the capacity of both internal and external, or is there someone else that supports internal?
Both internal and external. So if you mean like internal,
like your internal systems,
like operations and IT, things like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's dual CTO, CIO role. Yeah. Cool.
Dude, this is great. I like you. We're gonna have you back on.
I like you too, Joel. I knew I would. I feel like I've already known you though. I'm at an advantage.